Honestly, it's understandable why people want Pluto to be a planet again. So many of us grew up knowing the 9 planets of the solar system. But there's a legitimate reason for why Pluto was downgraded to a dwarf planet. But first we need to understand what the word planet is for, and that takes us back to the ancient Greeks. These guys called Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the Moon, and the Sun planets. If it was an object in the sky that seemed to wander, it was a planet. And looking back on it, it's very stupid because 1, it excludes Earth, and 2, it groups the Moon and the Sun together with the planets, and they are very different from each other. But you have to remember, no telescopes. They didn't know the difference between the Moon and Jupiter. It wasn't until thousands of years later when the Dutch first invented a telescope and suddenly astronomy became a lot more interesting. And as knowledge progressed, we dropped the Moon and the Sun as planets and we added Earth. Now, if something orbited the Sun, it was a planet. And after the 1600s, each century brought with it the discovery of a new planet, with Uranus in the 18th century, Neptune in the 19th century, and Pluto in the 20th. So what happened? Well, before we can get into that, we need to discuss a planet you've probably never heard of. This one. Welcome to Ceres. In the 1800s, astronomers discovered a small planet in the massive gap between Mars and Jupiter. And because it orbited the Sun, it was classified as a planet, despite it being incredibly small and you could not see it with the naked eye. The trouble is, Ceres had buddies. A lot of them. And a lot of them were around similar size. They started discovering a lot of objects very similar to Ceres in the similar area and a similar size, such as Vesta and Pallas. And as time went on, we found dozens and dozens and dozens of these small objects between Mars and Jupiter. Scientists and astronomers widely made the decision that these objects have more in common with each other than the inner planets and the gas giants, so they were given their own category, asteroids. Today, that area is now known as the asteroid belt, with Ceres being the largest asteroid in the solar system. And in 1930, an astronomer called Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto, named after the god of the underworld, Greek equivalent Hades. Originally, it was thought to be around the size of Earth, but as we observed it, the size got smaller and smaller. And as you can see, it wasn't just small for a planet, but it was smaller than several major moons: Triton, Europa, our moon, Io, Callisto, Titan, and Ganymede, and Mercury. And as Pluto was being studied and observed, we started to find other objects similar to Pluto in the same area. Deja vu, anyone? And we started to discover lots and lots of objects similar in size to Pluto. Scientists were concerned about this, but they chose to ignore it unless they found an object bigger than Pluto, which is exactly what they did in 2006 with the discovery of Eris. Though since New Horizons has been to Pluto in 2015, we now know that Pluto is bigger than Eris. In 2006, the International Astronomical Union defined the official definition of a planet. For an object to be a planet, it has to 1. Orbit around a star, have sufficient mass to establish hydrostatic equilibrium, so a nearly round shape, and it must have cleared the neighbourhood in its orbit, which Pluto and Ceres have not done. And this definition does make sense when you look at it. So I'm going to say, no, it should remain a dwarf planet.